Hello and welcome to the review of Your Deceptive Mind, a scientific guide to critical thinking skills from the GATE courses. So things and sentences, things I learned from this book, things I found fascinating. So the first one is, we are hardwired to believe people's stories. So and that's why it's so hard. So this is something we are, again, hardwired to do. So we believe in people. So every story that someone tells us, or it can be in the TV advertisement, we're more likely to believe in that. And that's really dangerous, because many stories, first of all, can be made up and can be told incorrectly in so many ways. And a lot of companies are actually using this in order to trick us. So they will show a product, instead of actually showing the scientific benefits, they will show, or they will give someone to tell his story about the success of that product, which not necessarily is true. Next one is, you tend to remember memories with emotion. So we are more likely to remember those memories that had strong emotions to them. It can be either that memories that happened to us or even other people. So that's I find that pretty interesting. The next one is source amnesia. What is that? Is when you forget where you heard that particular information. It happens to me a lot. And it's really, I never actually thought about it like as a thing, but it's actually a thing, is that source amnesia. You actually, and it happens to different people more or less, and that you actually forget where you heard it, but you know that. And as I remember in the book, is that he explained that we're more likely, and our brain is better at actually remembering what happened and what we learned, other than who said that, because who said that is not so important. What important is the actual lesson. And I find really interesting, especially because it happens to me a lot. The next one is, when thinking about what's the probability of someone win the lottery, the question is, what is the probability of anyone winning the lottery, and not a specific person. So even for me, sometimes when you say, what you see someone winning the lottery, say, what is the probability of him win the lottery? And we always focus on this particular person, which is not true. So what we need to do is, we need to think about it as, what is the probability of anyone winning the lottery, of all the people of someone winning the lottery. So like I said, anyone winning the lottery, as the probability is one of whatever it is. So it's a very low probability. So but we can ask, what is the probability of this one, which is even lower? You think about, what? So he has so much luck. No, this is distributed equally, and everyone had it. So someone had to win. So someone win. So when you think about, he's so special, or this and that, it might happen. Next one is, when next to authoritative person, we might turn off our critical thinking. And that happens a lot in some kind of, even if it's a rabbi or a professor or some kind of people that we admire in some way, we are more likely to turn off our critical thinking and believe in everything they actually say. And I definitely think I fell for that many times, and that's why we need to be more vigilant and aware, especially when we're around those kind of people, that, when whatever they say, just take that. You can always hear that, but don't take that as granted. And I'm sure it happens to a lot of, like, in school, or especially not only for kids. It's going to be only happening in colleges and in many ways. Or even a doctor. So we might, even when a doctor says something, like, we will take that as as the truth, when this is not necessarily true whatsoever. The next one is, changing behavior need the brain to work hard, especially the frontal lobe, which requires a lot of energy. And when people trying to change some kind of behavior, the frontal lobe is the one that actually trying to make that happen, and that requires an immense amount of energy of our brain, which I found interesting. So that's why when you try and change something, it can be really hard and energy consuming. And it's going along with the next one is the frontal lobe, when working hard, is consuming a lot of energy, which can explain why you use a lot of energy. So why some people might use a lot of energy, and when they try to change something in themselves, it's required, and it's actually hard, and they might be even, I don't know, thinner might be. So that can be a way of that's my theory. I'm adding to that that it can actually help people be thinner and skinnier, because that requires a lot of energy. The next one is, because it happens doesn't mean it had to happen. It sounds like very it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. So this is the fact that it happened, something happened, some kind of a situation happened, it doesn't mean that it had to happen. So some people like, okay, when it happens like this, only that was the only way, but this is actually not true, and there could be more possibilities, more outcome could be happening. Next one is false dichotomy, and that's the explanation. When you only give two options to that person when there is more, like nurture versus nature, there is a nurture, there is stuff in the middle. So that's the false dichotomy. You only give up. Mostly take place in situation of arguments. You need to choose this and that versus versus nature. You have to choose one of the two. But the truth is that there is a place in the middle. It's like some kind of a scale. It can be 20% nature, it's 80%. So it doesn't have to be one or the two. It can be everywhere in between. So that's the false dichotomy. Next one is, when you see people trip down, you think they are clumsy, but when it happens to you, you will have excuses such as it was a crack or I got distracted, etc. So I saw that happens to me too. When you see clumsy people, that's a good example, because you just like, you give the snap judgment of, oh, that person is clumsy, when sometimes you don't even know, it can be a total stranger. And you will say, oh, that's a clumsy person. And the thing is that when it happens to you, you will have excuses. And what is interesting here, I'm not trying to say like, oh, you knew, like you're also doing that. The thing is that those excuses might be true, might definitely be true. You've been distracted, or there is actually a crack, and that's why you tripped, or you seemed clumsy. But the thing is that when it happens to the other person, we don't understand what other variables or other contributors could affect his clumsiness, allegedly clumsiness. And so we don't fully understand the whole story, in other words. Of course, it can also happen that we are clumsy too, and we don't think, we don't remember that. But I'm not trying to get into that. I'm trying to to say that we don't understand the full story. So when we have excuses, the other person might also have good excuses that we don't understand and we cannot see. Next one is, people that feel they have less control in their lives are more likely to think all kinds of conspiracies. So there's like some kind of a study that people that have less control think that everything is conspiracy. So they're not everything, but they're more likely to think more things are related to conspiracies. So as I remember, he said, like, when you don't have control, you're more likely to think that other people have control and they are controlling and they are trying to somehow make everything their own way and deceive everyone, basically. It was interesting. The next one is, People like to hear they're wrong when, therefore, you can ask questions about the problem, like how do you think it works, or give analogies like I saw a similar story and it turns out such and such. So when you said, like, sometimes when you it's not an argument but some kind of a discussion, and you hear the other person says something that you do not like, or you think they're wrong, sometimes it doesn't help to say, oh, you're wrong, and just like give them a hard time for that, because it might not work. It's not like you cannot say that, because most times it won't work, because people they don't like to hear they're wrong. So there is, like, he offers two ways. One of the ways is you can ask questions about the problem. So how do you think it works? So let's say conspiracy theory, people won't like to hear, oh, the flat earth, let's say, for example, oh, you're wrong, and just give them like, oh, all kinds of like proofs that why you think they're wrong. But a better way is, oh, so how do you think it works? Not in a, like, it can also be like in a fascinating way. Is, oh, okay, so how is the sun works? How is this? How is that? So give them a way to think, how to think about the problem in their own way. Another way is give analogies with similar stories. So you can say, oh, actually, I saw that, and similar thing, and it turns out, so the example about conspiracy theory might not work here, but you can always give an example like on a different story. Like I can think of an example right now, but the idea is that you can give an same example about a similar story, and you can say, but yeah, I saw that something similar, but I saw that scientists, after they figured out that not the same story, similar story, they figured out the other way of what you just explained or expressed. So that's a better way that might work better to convince people that they are mistaken, not just telling them, oh, you're mistaken. I found that pretty useful. Not that I tried it yet, but and yeah, that was a good book. I really like that. There's some interesting ways. Most things, not most, but many things are already known. So a lot of ways the brain works, and all kinds of biases, and that was interesting. But yeah, that was I really recommend, and would probably give it like 4 stars. All right, take care.